Thanks for the invitation and for the opportunity. Daniel is still connected, all right. The opportunity to chair this session. Of course, we should not start from the question if we are convinced that PROs are becoming central, because in a way we had already the answer in the previous session, and of course it is clear that this is essential for also capturing the voice and capturing also what we can say the responsibility of the person with MS and of all those that are involved and representing the MS community, including the MS societies. We understood that it is important for the unmasking the unrecognized progression, the role of the PROs, and of course the involvement of the persons with MS and the involvement of the MS society that could have a big role, and you know how important is the role of the MS societies and the persons with MS in the PROMs initiative. But if we consider the enlarged scenario, there is a responsibility since more than 60 years of the MS societies in addressing, in setting the stage, in promoting, in financing research. And recently, this beginning of May, there was the official engagement of all the MS societies saying that the commitment that they have in the Pathways to Cures research strategy. So a global approach where all together we can work. Of course, it is important when we approach the global research agenda, as we did and as we are doing, to incorporate the patient needs, of course, but also the patient's perspectives. And this should be related not only in the process of developing, regulating and delivering the new therapies, but as well it's important for improving care and research as such. And the importance of the role of the persons with MS, the patient in general, for all the illnesses, is the so-called science with and science of patient input. Of course, we need to rely on a framework where all stakeholders are included, and a framework that can engage completely patients in research and care. We had from the Italian Society lead the development of a project that was funded by the European Commission that is called the Multi-Act project for the patient engagement and all the stakeholder engagement. And this idea, this project, this guide was embraced by the Global PROMs initiative. And this relates on the capturing the people experiential knowledge and trying to make this scientifically relevant for all the other stakeholders. And this is very important, because what could happen as when in many initiatives we use the word expert patient is that we just put a check mark saying, okay, I have involved the patient. This is not the way to act, because the multi-act project means that we need to have a real representativeness of the patient community. And we know how it is important this for MS, where we have a wide situation. And so the representativeness of the patient community goes through this new approach that is turning the experience of one in the experience of and representativeness of the collective community for MS. This session is a session that will present evidence from the global PROMs survey and will explain how to capture the experiential knowledge in this. We will have the results from the survey that had just taken place. I want to introduce the participants to the session, and I ask to come here at the stage Patricia Moghames, on the side, on the armchair, Pia Sormani, sitting side with Patricia, Susanna von Tonder, and Giampaolo Brichetto, that will join with me here. I will introduce them one by one, and for starting the session, I will ask them, that is Giampaolo and Susanna, to start. Susanna is an active member of the engagement coordination team, that is the key approach of the multi-act model. She is involved in the working group 1 activities. She is a disability rights activist, a patient advocate and blogger from Luxembourg. She is also vice president of Luxembourg MS Society and member of the executive committee of the European MS platform. Giampaolo Brichetto is the working group 1 co-leader. He's the coordinator of research in rehabilitation and clinical director of MS Society Rehabilitation Centers in Italy, and the present president of the Rehabilitation in Multiple Sclerosis, the RIMS organization. Up to you, Susanna and Giampaolo.
Okay, thanks, Professor Battaglia. This is a shared and joint presentation with Susanna. I will start with a summary of the activities of Working Group 1. The title of the session and this topic is a survey designed by and for people with MS, and we will discover how we have done this process along the past months. Just to share that this vision of how we can use patient-reported outcomes to unmask the hidden part of MS iceberg is one of the main activities and core of the PROMs initiative. These are the strategic priorities of Working Group 1 when decided to start with this initiative. We identify these 3 priorities. The first one is to identify and prioritize outcomes that matter most to people affected by MS, to provide guidance for identifying gaps in existing PRO, and finally to provide a framework to guide the development of new PRO together with people with MS within the governance of the PROMs initiative with the engagement coordination team. Therefore, we started to discuss within Working Group 1 how we can try to achieve the first and second priorities, and we decided to design a protocol in order to first ask globally to people with MS with a survey if they can help the PROMs initiative to guide the identification of functional domains, identify gaps and research needs, and prioritize functional domains. In order to fulfill this aim, we have planned to conduct a multi-method, multi-phase study according to different research questions. We have developed a survey developed by people with MS, and then we will run a Delphi study after the results of the survey. The design of the survey and the description also of the functional domains that have been identified within the engagement coordination team has been all provided by the engagement coordination team and then shared with the Working Group 1. This is the model that we have used. So we are moving from a model in which there is a patient expert to a model in which we are using the multi-act model. The ECT is ensuring representativeness of people with MS, and then the survey is outreaching globally to people with MS all over the world. So we started with development of the survey. We also have a team of external expertise and researchers that are experts in qualitative and quantitative analysis of survey and on Delphi. We have translated the survey in different languages. We have done pilot activities in order to understand from people with MS, from a small group of people with MS, if the survey was feasible and was understandable in different languages. And then we have launched the survey. The survey, we will see later, that is still open. So we will see the preliminary results to the date of 16th of October. So we are now here. And we will start presenting the results. But before starting presenting the results, I will leave the floor to Susanna in order to share how we have provided the survey.
Yeah, so thank you everybody for being here today. I'm very privileged to be a part of the PROMs initiative. So I'm going to share a bit how everything come to place. So about 3 years ago, that was 2020, we started this project. So we were 6 patients from all over the world who were recruited by the MSIF to participate in this project. So I was part of Working Group 1 based in research and validation. We, as the EICT, worked together with Working Group 1, so it's not just me and Inoa, my co-lead, who were present, but all 6 of the patients. We shaped the survey content, so we were looking at what was important for patients with MS, which functional domain should we include, what really matters to patients. And by doing this, we also included personal descriptions of the functional domains, since clinicians and patients don't always speak the same language. So we developed a plan to communicate the survey also to the wider community with the aim to ensure that we have representativeness throughout that. When we were at that point, we also designed an invitation letter to motivate people with MS from all over the world to participate in this incredibly valuable and impactful project. And then the survey was piloted in 6 languages with people with MS from 11 countries. After we had the preliminary results from that first piloting, we changed the survey again to make sure that the feedback that we have received was really incorporated. Afterwards, the final survey was launched, and the ECT members helped disseminate it all over the world. And to show you a bit more about how this invitation letter looked, you can see we have made a very personalized letter. We made sure that the most important parts says, why should you participate? Will it have a change? Because if something doesn't change the world, why should we actually invest our energy in? And as patients with MS, energy is very limited, as you all should know. We wanted to empower patients to let them know that they can affect change in their own lives. So we also shared a very personal picture of us, as you can see. It's very cute. And we hope that we wanted to reach a lot of people like that. We also gave them a reason to participate. We said together we can foster this change and actually make sure that the futures with people with MS will be better than what we have lived until now.
Thank you, Susanna. So we will move to the first results, and then I have a few questions for you. So these results are from 700 questionnaire, but we have reached now 2,300 surveys completed, and the survey is still open for contributions. we have reached globally this geographical distribution that is highlighted in the slide. We received more feedbacks the 16th of October from Europe and the South of America, but we are still open, so there is time to be homogeneous globally. The gender distribution was 76% women, the age of respondent 47 years average. And we ran a quantitative and qualitative analysis in order to understand if it was possible to identify new functional domains or symptoms from the data coming from the survey, and also if it was possible to identify cluster of domains, so trying to answer to a question that emerged from the working group discussion about interdependencies on functional domains. This is the reason why I put here these slides that was designed by the ECT, in which you can see the 28 functional domains identified by the engagement coordination team, and the issue of interdependence of domains. So we tried to understand if this interdependence was also available from the preliminary data. And I will not go into detail because, of course, the data are preliminary, so we will have to wait for the final analysis. But we identify cluster of domains that are related in the domain of problems in concentrating, in the domain of balance problems, anxiety, sensory changes, and sleep problems. So this is something that is an answer, a preliminary answer to the questions that emerged from the engagement coordination team. But I would like to ask Susanna to comment on this.
Yeah, so interdependence is quite prominent in MS. So we all know that one symptom impacts another. So basically it's a ripple effect or a domino effect. So if you have fatigue, you might have issues with your bladder or with your concentration and so on. Well, I thought that the domains that we had identified and the ECT were very relevant, and we also already saw that some things impacted us as patients very similarly. But I thought that the reflection of the results that we just had were super interesting, because in cluster 1 you saw that the capacity for memory and that's MS. I just lost my words. So for concentration, that was the word I was looking for. Yeah, and basically you just saw an example of what we found out. So concentration may limit your capability for speech. And this is not the only time this came to my personal experience. Over the past months, I was participating in the Luxembourgish national elections, and I had exactly the same experience. I started losing my words, I started having problems concentrating, and that impacted my speech. So I started mixing up words that sounded similar and belonged into the same category, for example. And what I find very interesting, it might not be only my personal experience, but we saw through the survey results, it's something that impacts the wider community. And yeah. Yes, exactly. So it does reflect what we have captured as the ECT and our experiential knowledge. But I'm sorry, I forgot one thing.
Okay.
What we also found out during the whole time is that there existed no PROs, also patient-reported outcomes, that actually reflected that there are no patient-reported outcomes that define interdependencies.
And thank you, Susanna. So moving forward to the qualitative analysis, we have only 3 minutes, but we will try to do that. We have also identified potential new area or domains, and consequently also possible gaps in developing new PRO. You can see it on the slide listed. For example, eerie problems, weight control is something that was clear from the qualitative analysis of the survey. Social functioning, for example. These are preliminary, but could be of interest. And also, we identify the possibility to add the meanings to the functional domains list, when the ECT developed the survey, we identified the domains, for example, depression, and the ECT provided a description of depression that was a representative of the experiential knowledge of the ECT. But then we also had feedbacks from the survey, and so we have potential added meanings to the original description of the functional domains. And so we can also propose changes to this definition. All this work will be done, of course, in the Delphi protocol. I would like to hear from you from this data.
Yeah, so we saw the preliminary results of the survey that we just received. So I thought that it absolutely reflects our experiential knowledge. The most important part of the survey was that it's not only a quantitative survey, but also a qualitative survey. And through that, we actually had the potential to identify the new domains. So I found particularly interesting the domain of dealing with medication and medication-related side effects, because that domain actually has the potential to affect adherence to medication. So if I have a medication that influences my life and my quality of life to such an extent that it's better not to take it than to live with the symptoms daily, we have to watch out and be careful if we do that. Especially because it could lead to failure of therapy. And concerning the definitions that were provided, I mean, we saw the definition of depression. So as ECT, we had the first, let's say, the first idea, the first stepping stone to describe depression. But through the Delphi process and through the survey, we learned that other people might, or other patients might have different definitions. So we have to incorporate those and those findings later on, maybe even challenge the existing definitions of depression later on, because clinical talk is not patient talk. So we don't speak the same language. I mean, as a psychologist, I'm very familiar with the DSM definition of depression, but are patients familiar with that? Do they actually know what they are trying to convey at that certain point in time? And are we gatekeeping people's potential of receiving adequate treatment because we don't speak the same language? So I'm certain that the survey and the Delphi process, incorporating patients in the process and in research, will actually have the potential to bridge the gap between clinical care and research and care of patients. So the ECT is the first stepping stone, and the survey as well.
Thank you, Susanna. Only to say in 30 seconds that we will close the survey in the end of November. We will analyze the final results and possibly publish the data, and then we will move forward with the Delphi. And then we will see if we will have a framework to develop also new patient-reported outcomes. I would like to thank the ECT and all the other stakeholders that have worked within Working Group 1 and the other co-leaders, of course, and also the research team that worked with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanna and Giampaolo. Of course, we saw how it's important to have the persons with MS researchers, with the researchers, and the other stakeholder, as it is in the working groups, and how it's important the involvement of the community at large. So we move to the second presentation by Patricia Moghames on the impact of multiple sclerosis symptoms survey by the European MS platform.
Hello everyone, thank you Dr. Battaglia. So my name is Patricia and I'm with the European Multiple Sclerosis platform. I will be discussing today a survey that we're leading on and still leading on under the name of IMSS, which is Impact of Multiple Sclerosis Symptoms, trying to understand how MS is impacting the life of people with MS. Just double checking. Thank you. These are just research was conducted independently, but we do thank our sponsors. I will start with the rationale of how IMSS came to life. I will discuss the methodology very quickly, and I will discuss how or what the outputs of this research will be and how it could be linked to PROMs. I will start with EMSP's strategic goals, very specifically that led to IMSS. Because EMSP strives to make sure that treatment and care are accessible for people with MS across Europe, but also to make sure that people with MS are invested in, specifically in research and involved in research, and to make sure that patients or people with MS express their specific needs, their experience, and that is integrated or moved forward to be integrated within management. So how does IMSS fit with EMSP's strategy? With EMSP's barometer in 2020, we realized that there are a lot of gaps in symptomatic care and treatments, and there's low accessibility and low reimbursement. And we wanted to understand a bit more how people with MS are living and experiencing their symptoms, and trying to understand from that experience so that we move forward to more personalized and catalyze that more personalized care. And because we couldn't find much recent data about symptoms as a whole in a large sample, with the largest one being in the USA in 2013, and in Europe there are small clusters of research papers, but often not linked to symptoms and care. So we went back to the different member organizations of EMSP with this question: are they interested to know more about symptoms? Are they interested in completing those gaps in the knowledge? And we got very positive feedback. But they also asked, like, we don't just want to know about the symptoms, we want to understand how are they linked to care, how are they linked to the quality of life of people, how are they affecting everyday's life. So this brought us to the objectives of IMSS, trying to simply understand or identify the symptoms, their prevalence and burden across Europe and across different European countries, but also to allow people with MS to sensitize their own individual MS experience and raise that with their healthcare professionals. We want to understand how symptom onset and symptom duration and severity are related to the use of DMTs or symptomatic treatments. And overall, we want to provide patient-reported evidence so that they are used to improve policies. So I will not dwell a lot, but with the development, we of course did a literature review. We involved patients, whether young people with MS or representatives from societies who have MS. But we also had a working group who had representatives from those societies, members of their boards, but also different biostatisticians, researchers, a lot of like neurologists, rehabilitation professionals, physiotherapists, just to make sure that the different perspective from the researchers, the clinicians, but also people with MS is included. And we developed the survey. It's anonymized, it was voluntary. It was translated to all national languages of the different participating countries. And it was an online version. And we were able to reach 17,151 people with MS from 22 different countries. These are just a small thank you for all the organizations who were part of this research project. So what did we collect? We had different domains, which are 4 domains. Obviously, we had socio-demographic data and disease history. We also wanted to understand a bit more about the quality of life, about the mobility. Obviously, MS symptoms, so the symptoms, the prevalence, the frequency, and the severity. And we wanted to, as I said, link with management and care. So we wanted to understand which symptoms, which care or management treatments people were using for which symptoms, and obviously reasons why some symptoms are not cared for, and to link that to the different satisfaction of people with their care. What do we expect with the outputs? And for the research, we closed the data collection. It was from May until August this summer. So we are just finalizing our data analysis, cleaning and analysis. And we expect to understand a bit more what the, of course, prevalence and severity of the different symptoms. What symptoms have the largest impact on the daily activities that are most limiting and most related or affecting the quality of life. We want to be able to link the different socio-demographic characteristics and the disease-related characteristics, but we want to understand a bit more the symptoms, prevalence and presence and severity, and how they are linked with current or past treatments or care, but also symptomatic and DMTs. And as EMSP, we definitely have the advocacy side. So of course, this is a research and will fill in the gaps in the knowledge. We will have a scientific publication and hopefully scientific publications on a national level. And we want to discuss this and bring this together with the scientific community. But we also want to push this to be able to use these findings so that we can push for policy improvement. So we want to have a policy brief, have recommendations, bring in together people with MS, with the clinicians, with the researchers, and try to understand how we can also push this on a policy level. So having discussions or high-level roundtables with decision makers. So how is it linked with PROMs? With PROMs, there are 3 different domains that everybody is well aware of. And we see IMSS really fitting with PROMs, obviously, but also with PROMs, with the experience of people with MS. And given that IMSS will be understanding a bit more how the symptoms are affecting the quality of life, we can help confirm which symptoms are the most debilitating, are the most valuable for people with MS, are affecting their quality of life the most, and fill these gaps so that we understand where the unmet needs are, especially that we link them with the quality of life, but also with the satisfaction of care. And we can understand or have a holistic view of how people with MS are being able to manage their symptoms or not being able to manage their symptoms. So with IMSS, we will have the research publication. We will understand a bit more about the symptoms and the management. We will push for advocacy work so that we can have an impact, so that policies become, or actually not, policies are developed so that care and treatment are more personalized, more harmonized. And hopefully, we will be able to fill those gaps on a national level with the countries that are participating, but also on a European level. And this really gives remaining questions because we had the previous discussion, but also the discussion now on the role of people with MS on how to collect their own PROMs accurately, non-invasively, precisely, continuously. But also there was this question raised on how healthcare professionals can also be involved in this. And this also brings me back to how can MS societies or the MS communities or people with MS and their caregivers be also more involved in this, because there needs to be a trust built so that people can understand the value of PROMs and can be eager to complete them themselves. And from the discussion that we had in the session before, there was this discussion that people with MS are interested themselves, and we just want to bring on board the clinicians. So it's really trying to understand the role of the different stakeholders involved in PROMs, with, as Valerie was saying, the patient being at the center, but also what comes with the patient at the center, with their caregivers, with the MS societies, with the different communities. So next steps would definitely be to understand, as we were discussing, which measures are the most accurate in a way, but also the ones that are most sustainable, most close to people with MS so that they can collect them in a continuous manner. And this activity was supported by the sponsors, and thank you very much, and I am on time.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. You, as a program coordinator of the European MS platform, have been working hard, and you have presented this also to the MS societies. And of course, we have to underline the role that the MS societies in MSP as well as in MSIF can have in the involvement, representativeness, and in the contribution to research and advocacy and transforming research in care. So thank you. The next presentation, the next speaker is Pia Sormani, Professor of Medical Statistics in the University of Genoa. She doesn't need a lot of presentation because she is well known also for all the work done in the clinical trials, and she will explain what we have learned from clinical trials to be used in clinical practice.
So thank you, Mario. And as you know, I'm a statistician, so for me it's very challenging to try to find a method to analyze PROMs in a proper way. So I'm going to show you something that I mediated from oncology that can be proposed as a method to analyze multiple outcomes in a personalized way. We all know that clinical trials are pretty rigid. For a clinical trial, we need just one outcome, to register the drug, and the result of a trial is an average treatment effect on the whole population included, so there's no personalized information and there's no person's preferences. So I'm going to show you, this is not really new, it's a methodology that is mediated from oncology. This is a concept that allows to combine many different outcomes into just one measure according to a priority list. And the priority list can be different for each patient. So the priority list is set by the patient. I don't want to spend too much into the details of how technically this is calculated. The name of the measure is the net chance of benefit or the net benefit. To calculate this single measure, the characteristics of this measure is that it can combine variables of different nature. So we can combine binary variables with continuous variable. And this is based on a pairwise comparison of each patient in the treatment group with each patient in the control group. So for all the measure, we have to compare each patient in one group with each patient in the other, and we must define whether we have a favorable comparison, if the treated patient is doing better than the controlled patients, or an unfavorable one. Or maybe we can have a neutral or an uninformative comparison if the two outcomes are the same or if one information is missing. So we can calculate an overall score for each measure. The comparison will be +1 if the treated patient is winning, -1 if the control patient is winning. We sum up all these scores for just the informative comparisons. If the comparison is non-informative, we pass to the second outcome according to the priority list. Okay, let's skip the EXPAND trial. This is just to show you that this measure is measurable for any kind of variables of different nature. And this is how to, but I am going to show you how it works. Let's suppose that we have this priority list. For me, it is disability accumulation is the most important outcome. The second is brain atrophy rate. The third is relapse incidence. And the fourth is MRI activity. If this is the case, I will compare each patient according to disability. If we have a favorable outcome for each comparison, brain atrophy and relapses are ignored. The same if we have an unfavorable comparison, but if the comparison on disability is neutral or non-informative, we pass to the second outcome, in this case brain atrophy, and we perform the same iteration until we go at the end of the list. So I want to show you a practical example, a numerical example. Of course, in clinical trials, we usually do not collect patient-reported outcomes, so I'm going to show you something on usually collected outcomes. But what I'm going to say is applicable also to multiple outcomes and also patient-reported outcomes. As you maybe remember, this is the laculimab studies. I always use these trials to run some statistical modeling because the drug was not approved, so these data are freely available for running statistical models. For the laculimab, we have two trials, the Allegro and Bravo. They were weakly positive on relapses with a reduction of relapses of about 20%. There was some effect on disability progression, a reduction about 35% in both trials, a very low effect on MRI lesions, 20-30% reduction in lesions, and a pretty good effect on brain volume loss. Let me show what happens if we analyze this data according to the priority list given by the trial. The primary outcome in these trials was relapse rate, the secondary outcome was disability progression, and then as exploratory outcome, we have active T2 lesions as percent of brain volume change. So if we examine disability first, we have 31% comparison that are in favor, and 24% comparison that are against the treatment. So the delta, I mean the net benefit on disability progression will be 7%. So for all the pairs that are neutral or non-informative, the first outcome was relapse. Then we examine disability progression, and we gain a 2% more advantage. Then we go to activity to lesion, and we go to 0.12. And then, as the last, percent and brain volume change. So the net benefit in the end is 13%. According to this priority list, being treated gives you a 13% more chance to have a benefit than being in placebo. But if we change the order, and for patients, maybe it's more important to have preserved their brain volume. So if we put percent of brain volume change as the first outcome, and then the second disability progression, and then active lesions, and in the end relapses, the net benefit will be much higher. For these patients, the benefit of this specific drug will be 20%. So, the same trial results, the same outcomes, but put in a different order. Of course, if we would have the patient-reported outcomes for these trials, we could try to analyze what the result is according to different priority lists. So, I think that this technique is valuable also in the light of trials, for example, assessing rehabilitation that are not exactly registrative trials. So we are not very much concerned about the primary outcome, but we are more concerned about the interpretation of the results that can be different according to different patients' preferences. This is just to show you the different results. So new methods for quantifying treatment effects, taking into account multiple outcomes exist. We must try to make the effort to apply them. And I think that this technique is particularly suitable for patient-reported outcomes. But of course, we must make the effort to collect these patient-reported outcomes in clinical trials. And that's all.
Thank you, Maria Pia. I should open the question and answer session. I don't know if there are questions from outside. Not on the screen. I was checking if there were questions from outside. Question from the audience. Giancarlo.
A question to Giampaolo and the question also to Maria Pia. So to Giampaolo, I think you will have the opportunity to explore if some variables influence the preference of the person with MS. For example, I can imagine that the priorities can be quite different in the very early phase of the disease, intermediate or advanced phase of the disease. Are you planning to have such an approach which can be done for many variables, age or other aspects?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it will be very interesting, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree, and we already plan to have this approach. We already started to analyze the preliminary results, taking into account the age and the disease duration and disease course, trying to understand if the preferences are different, and we will do also this with the final results. So I think this will be also extremely important, because I can imagine that also the preference on functional domains will change based on the disease duration, the disease course, and also possibly also the development of new PRO or existing PRO that will be used in clinical activities or clinical trials should be also based on the sample of people with MS that we will take into consideration.
And the question to Maria Pia. Maria Pia, very interesting what you showed, particularly considering that the way we examine progression today is mostly driven by EDSS and as a consequence by mobility problems. But we know that the evolution the progressive phase can be there to hit different other areas, for example, cognition or balance, and if we pretend to, with the given intervention, to affect all these different domains in the same way, with just one endpoint, that is, for example, EDSS, we will decrease dramatically our ability to pick up the efficacy of our intervention. So the question is, in your model, you had a priority, but is there also a model where instead of priority, you try to capture the impact on the different domains and then coming up with the final, let's say, estimation that gives some value to each of these? Maybe that no one is per se significantly effective, but when we combine, then you can see a quite clear effect, for example.
Yeah, you know, having such multiple domains, it's also difficult to have, it's also likely that different treatment can have impact on different domains. So I think that trying to combine according to a priority list can also indicate which treatment is better for each domain. You know, it's very difficult to combine, I mean, to have a unique treatment effect, a quantification of the treatment effect that is valid. However, since multiple sclerosis has different aspects, we must learn to, distinguish this aspect, and also to be prepared to have treatment that has benefit on different aspects. This technique allows to tell you which is, for each treatment, where the benefit is directed to. In a single trial, you can have benefit on different domain, but sometimes when you present the data according to the primary outcome, you mask these effects. We are familiar with that. The Ascend trial was negative, and it was negative, but it was positive on upper limb function, for example. So maybe if we have chosen a different primary outcome, the Ascend trial would have been positive, just to give you an example. But I think that this, irrespective of the positivity or the negativity of the trial on the primary outcome, we can give different interpretation about the treatment effect if we are able to see different outcomes, different combination of them.
Any more questions?
I have one question to Maria Pia. Congratulations. I was thinking that the main difference with the cancer clinical trials is that the disease is much slower than cancer. So think about progression and brain atrophy. So do you think that adding patient-reported outcomes, including sensor measures, could improve the possibility to detect improvements? And so that add these as events?
For sure. We have been concentrated a lot on progression because progression is low, is difficult to measure. And up to now, we haven't had the treatment really causing improvement. But this is not true for patient-reported outcome. You can have treatment that improves some aspects. So, of course, this technique can be used also for measuring improvement and also for measuring negative effect, to measure toxicity or side effect. So you can incorporate everything in just a single measure.
Of course, Maria Pia, you can personalize the evaluation, as you stated in the beginning.
Yeah,
and it can be stated the personalization also considering the aim. So going to, for example, agencies and saying this, say, symptomatic treatment can be useful for those that have this need, it can personalize the medicine.
So the important thing is to take this measure. So I think that the relevance of this initiative is to, include PROMs in clinical trials, because if we don't collect them, we can't do anything.
Sure. Paola?
No, I like to have a take-home message from this section and the previous one. That is, I like very much the Valerie definition. Restate, the state of art, or redefine the state of art. So, because as Maria Pia said, we need data, but if we are keeping on collecting wrong data or not relevant data, or we need to collect it in a different manner, also for clinician perspective. So this is something that needs to be taken into consideration, even if when we are designing survey, because I see very much the value of European MS platform survey for the patient preference, reported preference experience, but we need to be careful not to measure always the same PROMs that are not relevant or do not reflect the expectation of people living with MS. I don't know if you want to comment, Giampaolo or...
Yeah, I would like to say you're absolutely right, Paula, because it doesn't help us to have PROMs or pros that are not reflecting what matters to patients most. So we can, for example, if you want to measure how much cake you can eat every day with MS, that's not going to help anybody. So we have to watch out what we are measuring. And I believe that the PROMs initiative already showed a lot of what is to come. So, for example, we've seen the clusters that have been defined, the 5 in the preliminary outcomes. We actually, through the definitions provided by patients, have been able to actually construct something new. We are basically building on the future. And that only can happen in relation with patients and to patients, and not only from a clinical, let's say, a researcher point of view. We have to have people on the ground, and that only happens if you incorporate people who have lived experience, who actually live with the disease.
Okay. So, Giancarlo?
Well, no, just a comment about this point, Paula, because I think that is really fundamental, the concept of try to discover something new based on what is relevant for the person with MS. But we should also not forget that not always what seems to matter to the person with MS is really in favor of the person. Just to give an example, if I have a cancer that is not determining any problem to me physically, then it's not really the pain. What matters is for the interest of the person is something else. So always we should also try to validate if what matters more is also what is more influencing the final outcome. Because otherwise the risk is that we are not really looking for what is very relevant for the person, and we are looking for something that is with a short-term benefit for the person. Sometimes what is negative is related to a very positive final outcome and vice versa. So please be also paying attention to such an aspect.
Last question, behind.
Good afternoon. My name is Brichetto from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. I have a question related to the interview and the questionnaires that you are assessing right now. Are you also collecting data how people experience to fill out all these questionnaires? For example, how long it takes, if that bothers them or not, and also, like, I'm using PROMs in my outpatient clinic, and some people say that they feel kind of hurted, that if they cannot walk, for example, and every year they have to fill out again, no, I cannot walk, and then still they have to go to all these questions about walking, that it kind of hurts. So I'm just curious to know how people think about that part.
Susanna. Giampaolo and
Okay,
Patricia.
Go ahead, and then I can go
It's
ahead.
a question most for EMSP, because you are part of working group 1. You know that we have done the pilot activities in order to understand if it was feasible to fill in the survey, the questionnaire. But we haven't used patient-reported outcomes in our questionnaire. We have asked for preference on functional domains. But we have done these activities during the pilot activities.
Thank you. So with the IMSS, the purpose was not to use PROMs, but it was a cross-sectional survey to understand what matters most to them and what symptoms they are able to manage well and not well, and what's affecting their quality of life. So with IMSS, we were not specifically using PROMs, but I can answer one question specifically about surveys. And because the survey that we had was not a short survey, during the piloting and during the data collection, we encouraged the MS societies who were promoting the survey to come back to us with different feedback on how they felt completing the survey, what was challenging, what was not challenging, because we want to improve surveys. And with the different MS societies, we had different feedback, actually based on countries as well, because in some countries they have survey fatigue. And they were more reluctant to complete surveys rather than actually complete surveys. And in other countries, they were very interested in completing surveys because they are used to it as well. So even though both countries already had a lot of surveys, the perspective is a bit different. And the relationship with the MS Society as well is very important. So we collected information and we understood a bit more which questions were more accepted, if you want, by the community and which were less accepted, how long it took, like how on average, and the range of the survey. But again, the purpose, these are not PROMs in specific, so it could be as a next step for those specific measures.
So thank you for the participation in the discussion to the audience, and I hope it was interesting also for those connecting from distance. Thank you for the session, because it was important in enriching the scenario with new domains, new proposals from the persons with MS and from the community at large. And methodology is important as well, because if we can come to a personalized medicine, we need methodology to support this.